Welcome everybody. This is going to be primarily an audience participation session, as befits a talk about democracy. I'd like to begin by recognising that we meet on the lands of the Ngunnawal people, of the lands of Canberra, which I hope I have pronounced correctly, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend my welcome to any other Indigenous Australians who are here, recognising that they were excluded from Australian democracy for a shamefully long time. So, today I want to talk about encouraging everybody to participate. And for those of you who don't know me, my background is primarily technical. I've given other talks at this conference and others that were mostly about some fine technical details of some cryptographic protocol and why it was broken and why it didn't do what it was supposed to do. I'm one of the people who knows exactly how much the Australian government enjoys responsible disclosure. And it's all fun and games until we start talking about when we're going to tell the public. So, but today is not that talk. Today I want to talk about what we can do as software developers to try to encourage other Australians to participate a little bit more actively in the parliamentary process that we've got. So it's not about elections, it's mostly not about elections, it's mostly about the other 364 days of the year. The work I'm going to talk about is joint work with a lot of other people, but primarily Michelle Blom, Andrew Conway and Chris Culnane, who are also all geeks with backgrounds in algorithms and security, like me. I would like everybody to follow along with the slides because there are links in the slides, and I could have turned them all into QR codes and have everybody kind of, hold their computer up to the screen as we go. But instead, I decided to put the slides on my website at democracydevelopers.org.au. So please go to www.democracydevelopers.org.au, right here. Go to News. Gosh, this screen is much smaller than the screen I started with. Click on the Everything Open News and download the slides. And then you'll be able to just click on the links and follow as we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a bunch of projects that either we tried and they didn't quite work, or we're in the process of refining them, or we're thinking about trying them. The first one is called Ask Parliament. The next one is called Age of Reason. The fourth one is about explaining how Australian elections work. And the fifth one is possibly educational even for this audience, which is understanding exactly what happened to your STV vote. So first of all, a little bit about Democracy Developers. Democracy Developers is an Australian not-for-profit. We make all kinds of privacy-respecting open source software for supporting democracy. We recently finished a big project for the state of Colorado making risk-limiting audit software for their government elections. This is not that talk, but you can see there's a whole variety of different kinds of open source software that can support one way or another. Today's talk is closer to home, focused on what we can do in a public-facing kind of a way. I mean, the Colorado audit is also public-facing, but things that ordinary people are using. So today's question, how can we build software that encourages more meaningful democratic participation in Australia? And part of what I think we've realised as we've gone along is that this is a very different question. This is not one question. This is a whole cluster of different questions that address a whole lot of different groups of people or kinds of people at a whole lot of different points along their democracy journey. So helping somebody to participate more actively might be, at the one end, explaining to somebody how to vote if they've never voted before, or at the other end, really helping somebody who's already very active to understand exactly what bills are available now. So we kind of have a cluster of different solutions matching a cluster of completely different points. It's not even a spectrum, it's kind of a multi-dimensional graph. Okay, so things that we'd be proud of if we managed to achieve these things. Number one, getting somebody off the foul, angry, kind of social media-based pseudo-political participation and into actually engaging in some more meaningful way, right? Less screaming at your enemies over X, and more actually going with a group of your friends and talking to your MP about something that might actually make a change. Something else that we'd be proud of, and I'll talk a little bit more about this project in a minute, is actually inputting something meaningful into some parliamentary processes. Suggesting a really good question for a senator or a member of parliament or somebody sitting on a committee to ask that actually has an effect and exposes something interesting. And another thing we'd be proud of is just picking up somebody who didn't necessarily know a lot about the workings of Australian democracy and giving that person enough valuable information in a way that they could understand, that they were somewhat inoculated against stupid misinformation that they were coming from. So this is a kind of diffuse set of aims, but you get the idea. Okay, this is where we're having the beginning of audience participation. Put up your hand if you have, number one, sent an email or a letter or had a conversation with your MP. This is a very unrepresentative crowd. Okay, have you engaged with them on social media? Oh, fewer people. Okay, so this is really interesting. I also hate social media, for what it's worth, and have been boycotting ever since Musk bought X. But my guess is that probably for most Australians, those two things are the other way around. Put up your hand if you've written or co-written a submission to a parliamentary inquiry. Quite a few people. Okay, very good. Have you read a bill or part of a bill? Lots of people. And again, I think all this proves is that this is a bit of an odd crowd, but I think we'll just roll with it. Put up your hand if you've put in an FOI request. Put up your hand if you run a fabulous website that helps people put up FOI requests. Yay. So I love the Open Australia Foundation and righttoknow.org. And if you haven't seen it, please go and have a look because it's fabulous. Okay, put up your hand if you've organised a group of other people. Yeah, a few people. That's great. In some ways, it's the organisation that is actually kind of the thing I don't understand. Okay, pop quiz about Australian democracy. And the purpose of this quiz is not in any way to make people feel bad, but rather to get you to look around the room and realise that things you know are not necessarily known by everybody else in the room. Okay, question one. How many senators do you usually vote for at a time? So I can see some people are telling me, some people are just thinking. Hold that thought, we'll do the answers at the end. Name your House of Representatives electorate or the member. It took me a long time to explain to Americans, by the way, that our electorates have names when their congressional districts have numbers. And actually the numbers make a fair bit more sense, but anyway. So just think of the answers and then I'm going to ask you how many people are right. Okay, here's a question for the geek crowd. If a state had 1.4 million votes and we were doing our usual half-Senate election for a state, and a candidate got 400,000 votes, they'd get elected, with what transfer value would their separate? Have a little think about it, get a pencil if you need one. The answer is on the next slide. This is the only technical part of the talk. All right, question 4. And again, this is probably the wrong crowd for this question, actually. Australian Senate votes are counted manually, true or false? Yeah? Oh, that's true. The first preferences are counted manually. Okay, very true. All right, now we're going to do the answers. Okay, How many senators do you elect to for Territory 6 for a state? For the people who put up 6 because you were right. How many people got that right? See, if you got it right, look around the room and see how many people got it right. It's surprising how few people know really basic things. So I wrote a little app showing people who their House of Representatives member and their senators were as a prelude to other stuff. And one of the most common responses I got to that list was, which of these 12 senators is mine? Like, how come you're showing me 12 people? Which senator is mine? People don't, and these are from kind of middle-class educated people who live in inner urban Melbourne. You'd be astounded how this kind of basic idea that you've got 12 senators representing your state, or 2 senators representing your territory, is just kind of not part of what people know. And so when we talk about contacting those people, trying to get those people to represent your view, or trying to get them to change their behaviour based on your opinions or political preferences, if you kind of don't even know who they are or what the structure of their representation of you is, then it's really hard. Question 2 was, please click on this link. Question 2 was, name your local electorate or your local member. Has anybody tried to find this through the AEC website? Yes, I'm glad people are laughing. Here we go. Okay. So here it is. We can search by federal electorates, by locality or suburb. I live in Fairfield, Victoria, so this works. Right, Fairfield, Victoria, Cooper, there we are. But there are some localities, for example, the locality. I can see some people have already tried this fabulous website. Some localities are not unique. What does the AEC do about this? They could ask you for your address, but instead they say, if this locality search didn't give you a unique response, send us an email. So hold this thought. Did anybody get that did anybody try to use the AEC site and get that response for your electorate? Oh, that's a bit sad. To be fair, there aren't very many in that category, but there are a few. All right, so somebody ought to do a better job of that. The answer to the quota question is, yeah, excellent. If you're feeling smug, I have some enrichment opportunities for you later in the talk. How many people got that right? Small number of people, even in a very rarefied crowd, right? So, big pardon? He cheated because he knows things, did you say? Yeah, the political parties tend to have 1 or 2 people who really knows how it works. But I mean, again, this is kind of very fundamental to how you vote and who gets elected, but people don't know. And again, it's not really as if we all actually need to know exactly how STV works. I guarantee that nobody actually does. But it's more that without this kind of basic knowledge, people are more vulnerable to being misdirected into voting in a way that is not actually what they want to do. Yeah, Senate votes are not manually counted. The first preferences are manually counted, but the rest of the Senate process isn't manually counted. They're entered digitally. Sorry, just wait for the microphone. Who's the microphone deliverer?
I just wanted to highlight that the source code that is used to run that automated process is not available. The AEC has said it has commercial value, and therefore we're not actually able to verify through the code that what occurs via that math, that equation actually happens.
Yes.
We trust it, but you know. Do we? Oh, well,
We do. We could give a whole talk just about this, and I'm going to be disciplined and move on. But at least now we have an auditing requirement, right? We do actually have improvement. Now at least they have to go and fish some paper ballots out and compare them with their database. All right. So the rest of this talk is just a little bit of a list of things we tried that haven't quite worked yet. And what I'd really like you to do is pull out your device, open an email to info@democracydevelopers.org.au. I'm going to be showing you some things. There's no chance that there's enough time for audio, an audio opportunity for everybody to respond, but I'd love to get an email from you describing what you think of what I'm showing you and how you think we could make it better or what you think we should be doing instead. So info@democracydevelopers.org.au. Okay, the first thing we tried was called Ask Parliament, and the origin story for this was actually remember the COVID Safe app through the COVID pandemic? Put up your hand if you loved the COVID Safe app. Yeah, exactly. So I worked with a group of other geeks, some of whom may be in this room and many of whom you probably know, looking at how the thing was behaving under the hood. And we knew some things about it that it was pretty obvious the Parliament didn't know. There was some parliamentary process for asking questions. I forget if it was Senate estimates, but it was one of these kind of parliamentary committees where the MPs get to ask the people deriving the thing how it's going. And they were basically saying, it's got X million downloads, it's going great. But we knew that it was being downloaded and then crashing. So we knew that downloads were not the relevant metric for figuring out how well it was doing. And we also knew that it was kind of constantly pinging home. So there was this really good question that could be asked, which was basically, how many pings are you getting from how many unique devices, rather than how many downloads have you got? So anyway, this eventually kind of got through in a very ad hoc and personal way. But the idea of the tool came out of that frustration. And the idea of the tool was to let people suggest questions for parliamentary committees or question time to be able to say, look, you're going to get a chance to interview so-and-so in front of the committee. I've got a really good idea for a question because I know something about it. And people could upvote or downvote the questions or add comments to the questions and so forth. So it looked a bit like this. We did actually have a little group of people testing it. People asked all kinds of things. I'm not sure if you can read the fine print, you probably can't, but we had a group of example users. People had a great time thinking of questions. It never really took off as a concept, even though I think the idea is still fundamentally a good idea. It's on the back burner now, mostly because it was all just too complicated. I was trying to do too many things at once, and if you already understood the parliamentary committee process and the way that questions could get asked, and you already had some contacts among the parliamentarians and so forth, then I think you could possibly see the value of it. But when we gave it to people and they picked it up, we found that they didn't. They just kind of didn't get it. So I'm going to pause there and just give, has anybody got one question or one comment? And then I'll move on to the other things. And if you don't get picked, then please write it in the email to me. I guess the question is, yes?
Hello. I'm just thinking about, there's two pieces of information there. There's the question, but there's also the context, which you just talked about, which it seems to me is kind of like what you're talking about, voting. Like, nobody understands how parliamentary committees work and when there will next be an opportunity to ask something on the topic. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity there to tweak that so that it's more focused on, well, talk to your local MP who might be on the committee or will know someone who is, and these are the opportunities rather than what are specifically the questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a good question and probably a good direction to just, so to go back and steer the person through more of the context instead of just, here's a massive list of questions, have you got something to add? So yes, I think that's a very good. I would love to have ideas for how to structure that kind of lead up. I kind of want to give people enough information that they're not wading through a textbook, enough information that they can use it, but not kind of too much overload that they get bored. Okay, so that's on the back burner, too complicated. I thought it was very clever, but you know, you tended to either already know what it was supposed to be for or be unable to use it. Okay, the next one, it was inspired by the social media ban, although it's been kind of generalised since then. So the name, Age of Reason, was meant to be an amusing riff on the you know, level of responsibility being shown by our elected representatives compared to the level of insight that could have been provided by the average 15-year-old about the idea that facial age estimation was going to work. But that bill got rammed through the parliament so fast that we didn't actually manage to get the thing organised in time. But it is still up as a much more general tool. So this is functional now. If you've got the slides in front of you, you can go to this URL, ageofreason.democracydevelopers.org.au, and you can try it out. So try it out. We'd love to hear what you think. I'll give you, we are going to try an actual live demo right now. So it helps you to send an email to your representatives about a bill currently before the Parliament. So it consists of a little kind of preamble that helps you find out who your representatives are. I'm just going to make up an address. Does anybody know an address in South Australia that I can use? Yes? 5,000? Yep, very good. What's an address in, is that Adelaide?
Yeah,
what's
right in the middle of Adelaide.
Yeah, great. Give me an address in the centre of Adelaide.
Well, Hindley.
How do I spell Hindley?
H-I-N.
Oh, there we go. Is that it?
Yep.
Beautiful. So it finds out who your representatives are. Hopefully they're correct. We've got 12 senators for South Australia and the MP for Adelaide. And you can kind of click on them and find out about them if you like. And then it gives you the list of all the bills that are currently before the Parliament of Australia, which unfortunately is quite a lot of them. But for example, if you haven't yet read the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism Bill, the Firearms Regulation half, then you can click on it, find the official page for the bill, read it, etc. So let's pick this one, just because it happens to be first. And it then kind of invites me to send an email to my MP and my senators. I can unselect them if I like. I can write my own. I can write an idea about what I think an unintended side effect will be. The intention is to direct people into a kind of carefully considered, well thought out sort of a letter that will have some impact. And to discourage them from kind of aggro, to focus them on something that's actually before the Parliament, and to kind of help them draft it in a way that is to the point and says what they think, but doesn't involve abusive or kind of expression. I hope people are playing with it as we go. I had some discussion with some friends about initially encouraging children to use this, and the concern that when children used this, the only thing that would happen to them was that their email address would be added to the politician's spam list. So I added this, frankly, not very effectual, but at least better than nothing, little message to the children to say, our politicians are exempt from the Privacy Act. Ain't that grand? and to add a little message at the bottom of the email saying, please don't add me to your spam list, even though in fact they're unenforceable. So here we go. It makes the email and then it pops up my email client with a draft of the email, and then I can send it if I like it. So please play with it. I would love to hear, oops, I've left my email on. I would love to hear feedback, and it's definitely not perfect, but I hope it helps. Right, any comments or questions about that one? Down the front.
That's handy. All these seem to be focused on a very, very late stage in the political process after a policy has been developed, a bill has been prepared. Should you go back nearer the start as to what should be the policy in the process?
That's also a really good question. So how would you, where would you be directing people if you were aiming to get them into that?
Well, you could have a look at Peter Chen's PhD thesis, because he interviewed everybody who appeared before the Internet inquiry in the Senate a while back, and all the relationships between the people. If you're a member of a political party or a lobby group, you have a natural way to have an input to the process. Perhaps,
what if you're not a member of a political party?
Perhaps we need some open online places where people could form groups and find their tribe and provide that input.
Yeah, that's an interest. So you're saying perhaps the tool could be find your group, help find your group with which you can all get together and then go and influence policy at some stage.
Yes, because talking to MPs is, I found, basically a waste of time. It's far too late in the process, and they don't have much to do with the policy development anyway.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, good. That's an interesting thought. I'm not sure what to do with that information, but it's very difficult, right? Because I've also had the opposite problem in that many people in the room again were very active in the conversations around the TOLA. Remember the telecommunications something and access, basically forced access to encrypted telecommunications Act. And that went round and around and around and around and around in circles. You know, we're having a consultation, oh, we're having another consultation, oh, we're having another consultation. And it was actually only at the very, very end that anybody was paying any attention and getting amendments. So it's actually very tricky to kind of figure out exactly when the most efficient time to get in. There was actually another question up the back. Well, sorry, they actually had their hand up first.
Yeah, just a response to what the gentleman over there said. When I write an email to my MP, I generally don't do it about a specific law or a policy question. I do it about a current event, and I tell them my concerns about the current event and what kind of policy I, as a constituent, would like to see in response to that event and the context surrounding it, and that way getting in at an earlier stage, maybe before the policy is made.
Yeah, that's a related good point. So it's interesting. So both of those comments are about getting in at a much earlier point rather than focusing on the bill that's already there. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so next example. I had a screenshot because I didn't know whether the live demo was going to work, but there we go. Okay, the next example is going back to a much earlier phase. So this work is being led by Michelle Blom, and the idea is just a very an interactive but starting with no prior knowledge assumed explanation of how Australian voting works. So Michelle Blom and I have spent years and years looking at sophisticated algorithms associated with auditing preferential elections. This is really just the basic explanation of how preferential elections It's not actually quite ready for testing yet, but the source code and the work in progress is out there. Here's a nice screenshot of the work that she's done, just basically explaining how instant runoff voting works. And I guess the objective here is to give people the level of education and understanding they need started before they even talk about policy, legislation, or anything, just to the point of casting the vote they actually want to cast and having enough understanding to defend themselves against disinformation. So I might not talk too much more about that because I've only got about 10 minutes left. But again, I'd love people to go and have a look and see, try and think about the people in your life who don't necessarily know the basics about Australian voting and think about what you'd like to see in an app like this or a website like this. All right, so now at the other end of the spectrum, Andrew Conway has written a bunch of really sophisticated tools to help people who think they already understand STV, otherwise known as Senate voting, to realise that they don't. Okay, so this is actually my favourite project, even though I kind of recognise that the applicability is somewhat, shall we say, it's a bit geeky, but it'll be fun. Okay, so please follow this link, or obviously, so that's the Victorian link, but obviously you can, so it's vote.andrewconway.org, and on the slides I've got the Victorian Senate election, but of course you can choose whichever one you want. So we've got all of the loaded data for all of the elections in which the Electoral Commission publishes the vote data. So discussions about the open nature of the counting algorithm, completely agreed, but somewhat peripheral. At least the AEC publishes the raw preference data. So you can go to the AEC and get literally the exact list of how everybody voted in the Senate election, and you can recheck the count. New South Wales does the same thing, the ACT Electoral Commission does the same thing, Victoria doesn't, most of the other states don't. So, let's do the Victorian example. There's a whole lot of fun tools on this site, including the capacity to check whether your vote is in the AEC's list, but we're going to skip ahead today, and we're just going to go right down to the bottom and see what was the actual process of redistribution and elimination and passing around of. So you probably have a fair idea that your vote goes first to the first preference that you write, and then if that person gets a quota, your vote gets redistributed with a reduced transfer value to the next person on your list. And if that person is the smallest candidate at the point that we're doing, lowest tally candidate at the point where we're doing elimination, then they get eliminated and your vote goes on to the next preference and so on. But you might be a little bit surprised when you actually try to play with it. So the aim of this website is to show you exactly what happened to your STV vote in the context of exactly the votes that we know we got in that particular Senate election. So just to demonstrate, I'm just going to cast a donkey vote because this is an apolitical presentation with a based on there we go. Sorry, it's hard to donkey vote when the text is so small. There we go. Maybe I can do it by hand. All right, so I'm just kind of tapping on each person to fill in my thing. And so the question we're asking is, if I had added this exact vote to the votes that we actually got in the 2025 Victorian. No, doesn't want to vote for Pauline Hanson. Oh, there we go. Then what would have happened? Hold on, sorry, I've just realised that we actually want to... Sorry, I failed to donkey vote. Hope everybody else is trying this at home while I'm embarrassing myself up here. Okay. Oh yeah, trumpet of patriots, always proving that there are not enough numbers over 50 to go around. Okay, that'll probably do. All right, so now, if I had cast exactly that list of preferences, and that had been added to the exact votes that the AEC publishes that we know are already there, then here's what would have happened to it. And this probably doesn't surprise you very much if you kind of have a fair idea of how it works, but at least to me, the details are really interesting, even if you were already one of the people who was feeling a bit smug about knowing how to calculate transfer values earlier in the talk. So we have, so the donkey vote just happened to put a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth preference at a major party. That major party got more than 2 quotas. So the first 2 things that happen are the first person on that major party ticket gets elected, and then my vote gets redistributed with approximately half transfer value. I don't know if you can read this as 46%. So it's about in this case, that party got a bit more than 2 quotas, and the transfer value for moving from that first person was about a half. So 46% of my vote got left sitting on that first candidate, and the rest of the surplus got transferred. The second person also got elected, and you can see here this bright green bit says, and it's just a coincidence that also happens to be 46%, was used to elect the second candidate on the ticket. Then stuff happened, and you can see all that stuff happened in the first 5 steps, and then nothing happened for 273 iterations of the algorithm. And finally, at the 273rd exclusion step of the algorithm, somebody was excluded from the count, and my vote passed on to Fiona Patton, who you might remember was about number 7. Then she got excluded, and finally it passed on. I don't know if you noticed, but in the scope of the donkey vote, I eventually ended up with, by this stage, the Labor Party, and by this point, the first 2 people in the Labor Party have already got elected, so it ends up on the 3rd person of the Labor Party. So, I know that this is intelligible to about 1% of the population at best, but somehow what we'd really love to achieve is kind of taking people from the point where they want to see this to kind of from the basic explanation of how stuff works through to the point where obviously they don't have to precisely and exactly understand, but to the point where when they're putting their numbers in their boxes, they have a fair understanding of the likely implications of what they're choosing. I'm almost done. I know I've only got 3 minutes to go. If you want some enrichment activities, please click on the carefully hidden challenges at the bottom of the page. There is a guarantee that all of the challenges are satisfiable, but there is no guarantee that all of the challenges are satisfiable for any specific state and year. So if you can't find a solution, you might want to look at a different year or a different state or territory. All right, I'm going to stop there. If you didn't get time to ask a question, and you don't get time to ask a question in the next 2 minutes, I'd still love to hear info@democracydevelopers.org.au. Please write to me and tell me what you think.
Thank you for a fantastic talk. Very informative. We've got time for maybe one quick question.
I find the hardest thing about trying to get people to claim their agency over lots of things is motivating them. They're like, it doesn't help anyway. Like, Google knows everything about me, it may as well know about my email. You know, how will writing a question to my MP you know, does that even work? And I think that's, you know, one of the biggest challenges is helping people to see, you know, how this works. And so I'd love to know how you can. There you go.
Yes, I agree very much. Your question reminds me that I had a list of questions that I wanted people to answer. And yes, absolutely. So all of this is kind of assuming that kind of lowering the barriers and making it a bit easier is actually going to motivate people to do it. And you're completely right. It's actually very unclear whether that's sufficient or not. People have said to me the thing that would motivate it is a little bit of positive feedback. Like if you suggest your question and somebody in Parliament actually asks your question, then that's really fun, but really exciting and really motivating. But how do we get to that point in the first place? Yeah, I do not know. Please read the questions and answer email if you can. Donna? Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Question was, have we done any outreach, for example, to the Museum of Australian Democracy? We have not, but we probably should. That's a good idea.
All right. Thank you again, Vanessa.